focus on this. When you say that
He
President
doesn't get
Obama is one of the most divisive presidents in history, that's something that you guys can never back up. You never can bring up any substance. It's a talking point that you guys always say. So to Abby's point, what specifically are you referring to when you say he's one of the most divisive presidents in history?
When you spend years repeating a political talking point in an echo chamber, it feels like an absolute fact. But the moment you step onto a news panel and get asked a basic, fundamental question, what is your evidence? The entire structure collapses. That is exactly what happened on live television when a conservative commentator claimed that Barack Obama was one of the most divisive presidents in American history. When pressed for receipts, she tried invoking land acknowledgments, the IRS targeting scandal, and claims of Obama apologizing for America. What followed was a textbook lesson in how facts dismantle manufactured narratives in real time. If you believe in media accountability, sticking to the facts, and holding commentators to their receipts, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'm Neil. This is The Honest Perspective. When you assert a claim on national television, you better bring the proof. Let's get into it.
Tonight, the Obama Presidential Center is officially open. All 4 other living former presidents and first ladies attending the opening ceremonies on the south side of Chicago today, along with a number of celebrities. President Obama took the podium and encouraged Americans not to lose faith in each other and to remember that collective voices and how we treat each other matters. Forgetting that fact, he says, only gives power to those trying to divide us.
For us to give in now, after all this country's been through, to cynicism and division would be a betrayal of our founding ideas. And I remain convinced that the overwhelming majority of Americans feel the same way.
So in some ways, this was like church for liberals. It was. Everybody was dressed in their Sunday finest and sitting in the pews. And he was delivering a message about, not just about that, but also actually, there was a lot of contrast happening about Trump in the remarks from him. And I'll play some a little bit later from Michelle Obama. What did you make of it?
You know, I really thought it was great that he didn't mention Trump's name one time. You know, he did mention him one time. And I think that, frankly, America got to get a chance to remember what it was like to have a president that could really give speeches that united us as a country. And I think what's really interesting is that, you know, Trump spent decades criticizing Barack Obama on literally everything that he could do. And then ultimately, he got a chance to see on the day that, you know, Obama opened up his presidential center, Trump got to negotiate a pretty bad deal. And I think that it's really just a reflection of why it's important to talk about history. I think a lot of people are going to be able to learn about the JCPOA. And as this MOU comes into fruition, they'll be able to see exactly the contrast there.
I do want to play this from Michelle Obama because she alludes to these attacks on her husband from people like Trump, for example. Here's what she said.
The claims that a U.S. senator and constitutional law expert wasn't qualified for the job. The lies about your birthright, your faith, your patriotism. The outrage when you stated the biological fact that if you'd had a son, that he too would be black. Yet, you were unflappable at every turn, always focused, always calm, always looking at the long view.
And what she's not saying there is that that is a contrast with the guy in the White House right now.
You know, the words we didn't hear from these remarks today: sucker, loser, piggy, stupid, fake news, idiot. It's a permission structure when a president uses those terms for our children to hear it and our children to want to use those terms as well. It's modeling the worst of rhetoric and the worst of behavior. President Obama, First Lady Obama, didn't invoke the name calling that has gotten in a cancerous way into our political bloodstream and makes us not want to expose our children to the highest people in power.
And Mark, I saw you nodding. I mean, do you agree with that?
I do. I have, as I think you know, tremendous respect for President Obama. I had the privilege of actually being in Grant Park on election night with the Obamas and the Bidens, watching the results of that campaign. I'll never forget that moment. And I think what this was really about, I don't think this would have been the place for that kind of political rhetoric. This was not a political event. This
Sure.
is the dedication of a presidential library. And he did it and gave that speech with the class and grace that is consistent with Barack Obama. I might not have agreed with all of his policies, but when it comes to being someone that was, I think, a president that crossed party lines, and I think we'll see later on remains very highly popular from people that both lean right and left, I think what we saw today was consistent.
Okay,
And that's
there's
exactly
a little
what
bit of
President Obama-
revisionist history. Yeah, he's incredibly eloquent. He's very skilled orator. He's very articulate. I'll give him all of that. But he was also a very divisive figure.
How?
And can I talk? Can I talk? Thank you.
This is a good one.
Look, we saw it was on full display. They open it up with perhaps the most performative woke thing you can do, a land acknowledgement. Really? You're going to say this is on stolen land? If you think it's on stolen
Crashing out over
land, if
a
you
land
think it's on stolen
acknowledgement?
land, then give it back.
This is
Don't
all you- I mean,
build
this is like Tan
us-
Suit 2.0.
Don't build an $850
Seriously?
million library on it. The other thing is, I know I
Is it
like
not
the idea
stolen?
that he united Americans, but I don't think most conservatives.
But how is he the
conservatives
most
who were
divisive
targeted by the
president, Lydia?
IRS, nuns who were told they had to pay for abortions and contraceptives, and he was
But how
very
is he the
divisive
most
when
Can I
he
just
actually
say, when
wasn't
we're talking
on it.
about things that using federal government, first of all, Obama did not target the federal government for his opponents. That is something that Trump
Okay,
is doing.
well, I think
Hold on. I
nuns
let you talk.
and
That he
Christians
also did not do that. What I will say, one of the bigger contrasts, I think, that has not been mentioned, I think, over the coverage is you have to remember that when Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump, it was Barack Obama who called Hillary Clinton and told her, you need to concede. And he understood that there needed to be a peaceful transfer of power, and he told her that. Then what happened? He welcomed the Trumps to the House, to the White House. He ensured that they had what they needed in order to have a peaceful transition. Take that, and then take January 6th.
Notice what just happened here. The moment the claim of divisiveness is introduced, the evidence brought to the table is a land acknowledgement at an event and the IRS targeting controversy. But as the panel is about to point out, invoking the IRS scandal omits every single key finding from the actual Inspector General reports and congressional investigations. Let's watch how the panel responds when they push past the rhetoric and demand actual facts.
And look at that
but
contrast.
what I'm really-
Hold on,
what
hold on. I'm not done. Look, but listen to that contrast. Then there is also Barack Obama has done a lot to raise the next generation of leaders, while you have Donald Trump, who is just saying, I anoint people.
Well, let me let Lydia respond to that, because I hear you saying, first of all, you're accusing Obama of personally doing something that
No,
we
his
know-
administration. His administration.
Well, we know that what you're talking about at the IRS was the responsibility of individuals within the IRS who were held responsible for that. That had nothing to do with Obama.
She
and you've
knows.
never nobody has provided proof that that came from the White House or from the president's office. The second thing that you mentioned, which is basically abortion policy, I take it that is your view of how that policy should operate in this country. But you have to understand that
it was a religious
another
freedom
half
issue.
of the country believes the opposite of what you believe.
Right.
So when you talk about divisiveness, Barack Obama was smeared as not being a legitimate president because Trump was lying that he was not a native-born American citizen. And then he welcomed that same man into the White House.
Right.
Their wives sat down and had tea. So what else?
I think Obama is
it's a legit
incredibly.
question.
I think he's incredibly.
It's a legitimate
classy.
question. What else? Why is Obama considered by a lot of conservatives,
Black.
and maybe you're one of them, to be so incredibly
Right.
divisive? Is it because he told people he was black?
Right.
No, no. I think he's incredibly classy. He's a very eloquent speaker. I think there's a lot of things to credit him for.
Lydia,
I'm
how
saying his
is he the
policies.
Hold on.
You know, and I will credit him for this as well. He said that he thinks America is great today. I think he said
Why is
the
he
U.S. is an
divisive,
undeniable force for good in the world. And I was glad to hear him say that, because when he was in office, he would go on these sort of tours essentially apologizing for America. And I look at the Democratic
hold on a
Party
second.
today,
Yeah. Hold on a second.
36% of
Last
whom,
year,
36% of whom are not proud. Only
Last year,
36%
Donald
of them
Trump
are
went
proud
to
to
the
be.
Middle East, and he said that America's past policies of regime change in that region had been a failure,
Right.
and that it was that we were trying to basically overtake these great societies. He was literally what you guys accuse Obama of doing. Trump went to the Middle East and said that we've been trying to change your societies and we have failed, and we've been trying to export our way of doing things on you.
Abby, she's
He said
garbage.
that
She knows.
last year.
Right.
So I am not understanding this. Like,
Well,
or at least I want to see more
in that
evidence. I would like
respect,
to see more evidence.
certain-
That's all I would like to see.
In
She's
that
a
respect,
bigot, that's it.
circumstances changed a bit, right? Iran advanced their nuclear program much more rapidly than expected. There were changes in the
that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking what Trump was talking about was the U.S. military involvement in the Middle East,
I know
Iraq and
what you're talking
Afghanistan
about.
wars, and beyond. It was a very broad statement. She just said Obama was apologizing for the United States around the world. Where's the evidence? That's all I'm asking.
Well, so I think we're missing the point of what President Obama was trying to say during this speech. This was not an anti-Trump speech. This was not, let's get back at him. This was, we need to come back together as a nation. We shouldn't have states opting out of the 250th anniversary celebration in D.C. as a political statement. I heard that this morning. It was absolutely heartbreaking news to hear that that's even being considered. And I don't think that Barack Obama is terribly happy with the state of his own party right now.
Yeah.
It looks very different than it did when he was in the Oval Office. It's much more polarized. It's been had quite a lot of woke and other influences that I don't think that Barack Obama was a woke president. That wasn't even a thing when he was.
But look, here's the thing. I get that you might get it, but I'm really just focused on this. When you say that President Obama is one of the most divisive presidents in history, that's something that you guys can never back up. You never can bring up any substance. It's a talking point that you guys always say. So to Abby's point, what specifically are you referring to when you say he's one of the most divisive presidents in history?
He did not invite Milli Vanilli to the library party today, or Vanilla Ice, or CNC Music Factory. That's a difference from the American 250.
That
Didn't
is a
have
big
that on
difference
my
from the
bingo
American
card,
250.
for
That
sure.
is very true. Next for us.
What makes that panel exchange so revealing isn't just that the conservative argument fell apart, it's why it fell apart. When you examine the specific talking points brought up on that stage, every single one of them relies on a revisionist history that ignores documented facts. Take the IRS claim. For years, a dominant narrative on the right was that the Obama White House ordered the IRS to target conservative Tea Party groups seeking tax-exempt status. But what do the actual receipts show? In 2013, the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration conducted an extensive audit. The investigation found that while the IRS used inefficient and improper criteria, such as searching for terms like Tea Party or Patriots, this was initiated by career civil servants in Cincinnati dealing with a massive surge in applications following the Citizens United ruling. Furthermore, a subsequent 2017 report by the Treasury Inspector General revealed that the IRS had used similar broad search terms to screen liberal and progressive groups as well, including terms like Occupy and Progressive. Most importantly, multiple bipartisan congressional investigations and a years-long Department of Justice investigation concluded there was zero evidence of political bias, zero evidence of White House involvement, and zero evidence of criminal wrongdoing by administration officials. Yet years later, on national television, that thoroughly debunked framing is still trotted out as primary evidence of systemic division. Then look at the contrast raised regarding foreign policy and rhetoric. The panelist claimed Obama went on apology tours abroad. That was a political slogan popularized during the 2012 campaign, referencing speeches where Obama acknowledged past American foreign policy missteps in places like Iran or Latin America. But as Abby Phillip pointed out right there on tape, if acknowledging past foreign policy failures constitutes an apology tour, then Donald Trump's explicit public criticisms of past U.S. interventions in the Middle East, made while standing on foreign soil, would fall under the exact same standard. The core issue here isn't whether someone agrees or disagrees with Barack Obama's policy record. There are plenty of substantive, progressive critiques to be made of the Obama administration, from the heavy reliance on drone strikes, to record deportation numbers in his first term, to the decision not to prosecute Wall Street executives following the 2008 financial crash. Those are real policy debates backed by records. But that isn't what happened on that panel. What we saw was a collection of vague talking points that completely dissolved the second a journalist simply asked, "What specifically are you referring to?" When you strip away the partisan slogans and demand receipts, the narrative collapses. If you believe in media analysis that prioritizes facts over talking points, truth over access, and people over profits, subscribe to The Honest Perspective. I'm Neil. Demand receipts, verify the claims, and never accept manufactured narratives at face value. That's The Honest Perspective, and that's where I'll leave you.